Welcome back to our celebration of America's 250th. I'm Gary Jobson, and we're honored today to have Peter Sweetzer with us. Peter is a veteran of being in the United States Marine Corps, and since that time he's become quite the aficionado of all things maritime. Particularly, he is a model maker and on a committee at the New York Yacht Club to oversee the work they do, and models at the New York Yacht Club are really important, particularly their America's Cup collection. Peter, here's a tall ship that you've been working on this model for some time, and then just a couple quick questions. How in the world do these boats get steered? How do you aim them in what direction and course you want to take?
Well, Gary, the steering is actually the easy part once you know where the wind's coming from on a square rigger like this, because they only really go downwind. Now, that doesn't mean dead downwind, but it means they gotta pretty much be going with the wind to work. But when you are in that position, there's a rudder right here. That's controlled from inside this cabin right here, which protects the helmsman, and away they go.
And would there be more than one helmsman, more than one person steering?
It could be. Some of the wheels on some of the bigger ships like this actually have two sets of spokes that come outside, and they could have as many as 4 people on the helm at the same time.
Well, it's certainly been impressive with the tall ships coming up and down New York Harbor and the Hudson River. It's impressive. And I think one of the things that people are astounded about is how many sails these vessels have. You know, we're used to sloops racing with a headsail and a mainsail, and here there's a lot of sails. And what's intriguing to me, these sails all have a different name, which you have to know. So we have the royals, we have the gallants, we have the mainsail, we have the spanker and the skysails. So where do all these sails go, and how in the world do you memorize all these sails?
Well, the truth is, Gary, I don't, because I can't remember all of them. But if you want to do it professionally, you learn. So let's just go through that if you'd like to see where they are. First of all, we ought to start with the fact that this is called a ship-rigged ship. Ship has 2 meanings. A ship is a vessel that is too big to be on other ships.
Okay.
Once you're a ship, there are various rigs with the mast and the sails. This is called a ship or a full rig ship. So that means it has 3 masts. This is the foremast, the mainmast, and this is the mizzenmast. Those are standard. All ships would describe. Even even boats that might have 5 or 6 will just have several mainmasts. The sails, let's start from the bow again. This is the lower one right here, which would drop off of this spar right here. This is called a yardarm.
Yep.
And the sail would drop below that. Then that's the main course. This is the topsail. This is the top gallant, would we go right here. This would be a royal right here. On the mainmast, it has the same thing. You'd have the main course, the main topsail go in here, the main top gallant goes here, the royal goes here, and on this one, there's actually a skysail for obvious reasons. That's pretty high up on these boats.
How high up would one of our tall ships be?
This model, which is a generic model from the early 20th century to late 19th century, that is the 1900s to the late 1800s, this was probably 300 feet long. So these could very well be 200, 250 feet high.
So it must have been pretty scary going up the rig out in the yardarm.
Well, imagine that in a seaway with the seas rolling you back and forth. So the answer is very scary. I suspect that they put the youngest and most gullible sailor up on the top for that purpose.
Well, there's an old expression, one hand for yourself and one hand for the ship.
It's absolutely true. That prevents a lot of errors. The last one, which is the unusual for the ship rigged, is the sail that goes right in here. And this is what's called a gaff-shaped sail, but on a ship it's called a spanker, S-P-A-N-K-E-R. that helps balance the helm. That's
Got
its
it.
real purpose. It doesn't do much for driving the ship forward, but it does do a great deal for helping the helmsman keep from having to rotate back and forth.
So let's say you're out in the middle of the ocean and it starts getting really windy, 40 miles an hour or even more. Do you reduce sail? You take some of them down? How do you handle it?
You absolutely do, but you might find that you sometimes, depending upon the sea and the wind, because you have to gauge them together, you might take the lower ones down and take the course up for two reasons. One is those are the biggest sails. Secondly, you can see better. Because imagine if you were back here trying to see a sail that's lower here, here, and here, you'd barely be able to see what's out in front of you and what's coming at you. The other thing that you might do is you might then move down, take down your absolute topsails, because anything up high has more of a force in a leaning moment, which makes the ship, I should say, heel to the left or to the right more by having from the force at the top.
So there's stability in the ship to keep it from rolling over.
It absolutely is. That's the ballast that's usually in the bottom. And on a cargo ship, which is what this is, they would have put their heaviest cargo down low.
How many crew would be on a vessel like this?
I'm not exactly sure, but I would think that this vessel probably had a crew of 30.
Well, not too many, so a lot of room for cargo, not so much room for all the people. And
They'd all be, there wouldn't be anybody below deck here. The cargo would be all friggin' right up to the top, and they'd all be forward here. The captain might have a cabin back here that is shown by these skylights right there, but and then there'd be an area here for the main galley where everybody would eat. The rest of it would be cargo because that's what pays for the voyage.
No motors, so everything's handled by hand. They did have some winches that could give them a little bit of extra leverage.
Not many. Everybody bent onto a line, went through a turning block in order to take a downward pull on the sail or the spar and turn it into a horizontal pull on the deck.
So it must have been a lot of work. Now, on these ships, did they stand watches, 4 hours on, 4 hours off, or how did the routine work on board the boat?
4 hours on, 4 hours off is a current naval and also commercial, and even, as you well know, on racing boats, 4 hours on, 4 hours off, with some adaptations. But I would think it might be possible that except in very rough weather, they'd be 5 or 6 hours on.
Oh,
Because these were a lot of work and the guys needed rest.
what's the motion aboard this boat? Is it violent? Is it smooth? If you're on board the boat out in the ocean, what's it feel like?
That's a good question. If you haven't been there, I know you have. A lot depends more on the sea state than it does on the speed of the wind. Because if you have a sea state that has high distances between the trough and the peak of the wave, you could be falling off a wave coming in front of you and it crashes. And down below is, again, you know so well, it's like sleeping inside a drum.
So it'd be very dangerous to be out here on the bowsprit in waves like that.
Highly, highly recommended not to be there. Now, in the days of the 19th century, they didn't work with rigs and harnesses like we do today. They just walked out there, and the answer is they lost people.
Wow, it was a sad thing.
Yep.
Now, I went out on a bowsprit on the Stad Amsterdam, but I had a safety harness on. I wanted to be careful, and I also got to the top of the mast.
Did you really?
Yeah, and I had a safety harness up there as well. And at the Stad Amsterdam, we were going downwind with westerlies across the ocean, and the boat would do this very slow roll. We're going downwind, back and forth, and I timed the roll, and then I tried to figure out how many rolls did we do in this transatlantic crossing. So it took us 14 days on the Stad to get from New York to Cowes on the Isle of Wight, and I calculated we did 119,000 rolls of this vessel crossing the Atlantic Ocean. It was great fun, and we were mighty glad to get there.
Well, I admire the fact that you're willing to do that. I've never done it. But I will say this, and I also guess that you would agree, at first, it's scary, but then you learn to trust your boat, which is probably the most important thing to any sailor on any size boat. It's not going to do something that you don't expect it to do. And on those kinds of rolls, you get used to the back and the forth.
That was great fun.
I bet it was.
You get kind of the cadence going. All right, well, we have a number of tall ships here in the harbor, and maybe we can just go run through them and maybe have some comments on each one as we go through.
Okay.
This is really exciting to have these tall ships in New York Harbor. And we're going to go through a laundry list of some of these vessels, starting with the Amerigo Vespucci. This boat is from Italy and was first commissioned back in 1931.
And Gary, what's to see right here is that this is a ship-rigged ship, just like we discussed here. So you can see the 3 masts, forward, foremast, mainmast, and then the mizzenmast, and you notice that the spanker is up there. You'll also notice, if you can see in the depth, that the lowest sail on the mizzenmast is not rigged. And that's just because the captain is deciding how best to balance the rig. So there are all the sails that we looked at when we described this ship right here.
From the time it hauls its anchor up and starts sailing to get all those sails hoisted up and set, how long does it take?
Well, you're not talking minutes. You're talking probably several hours. Because remember, for most of these, there are no automation to it. There are no electric winches or anything of that sort. And also, as you can imagine, those sails at the top are difficult to pull up because of the amount of line and the friction. And the bottom ones, it's difficult because of the weight of the big sails. So it takes a bit of time.
How much do some of these sails weigh?
I would say that the main mast, the middle one, the main course, which is the bottom one, I would say that probably takes 6 or 8 guys to carry that.
Wow, they're heavy.
They're heavy.
Hundreds and hundreds of pounds,
Yep.
Maybe even 1,000 pounds. Well, right now, looking at the Vespucci, it's not going particularly fast and the wind looks kind of light. But in a stiff breeze, how fast can it go?
I don't really know how fast they can go, but my guess would be 7 or 8 or 9 miles per hour.
Okay. Our next vessel is the ARA Libertad that comes all the way from Buenos Aires. And of course, I love the name Buenos Aires, which means good air.
Well, this case, I've got another of the ships that are out in the New York harbor that is a ship rigged, like we've been talking about before. And the reason I did was because this angle shows something else that we didn't talk about, and that is, in addition to the sails attached directly to the 3 masts, you have jibs forward and staysails in between. It is absolutely a practice of these types of ships, arguably almost every boat built, to, when the weather allows, put up every piece of cloth, a form of a sail, a name for a sail, that you can possibly carry to get more speed.
So you get every sail adds incrementally a little more speed.
A little more speed.
Our next ship is the U.S. Coast Guard Eagle. This is a training ship for the Coast Guard Academy based out of New London, Connecticut. And it's an interesting vessel because it was built in Germany in the 1930s, and we acquired the boat as war reparations after World War II. And the Eagle has a specific category. It's a barque.
It's a barque, Gary, because at first glance, it looks just like what we were showing before and what our model. But at a second glance, you'll see that the aft mast, the mizzen, has no square sails on it. It only has what are called fore and aft sails for obvious reasons. In fact, the lowest one is still called the spanker, and it's exactly what's on the ship, but in this case, nothing forward of it. And that's an important distinction, and the reason they do that, it would help them go closer to the wind when they were sailing than they could with all square sails.
I can't help but notice that it's got a huge American flag on the after end of the vessel.
They don't want to be mistaken for anybody else.
And it's got the familiar Coast Guard
It does.
logo in the bow of the vessel. And I find it intriguing, Peter, that every cadet that attends the U.S. Coast Guard Academy spends some time in the summers on the Eagle.
Yep.
So to them, the Coast Guard, sail training is still an important thing.
There's no question about it, Gary. There is no, rephrase, there's a very small likelihood that any of those young men and women will actually ever go on duty on a vessel like this. But the experience of handling those sails, just like they did 100 years ago, helps their leadership training. It helps their understanding of how these boats actually work under sail. That sort of information can be very valuable as they go into their career.
Leadership, and I have to think a lot of teamwork too.
Very much so, I would bet.
All right, let's go on to our next vessel. Our next vessel is Mircea. It comes from Romania, and it too is a barque.
It too, indeed. The reason why we're looking at this again, number one, it's because it is here in New York Harbor. Our viewers are going to have a chance to possibly see this at sail, but it also helps to now see the different sails that we were talking about. And just to quickly repeat, you're looking to the left, you're looking to the foresail and the jibs out in front, the square rigs, the staysails in between, the square rig sails, the staysails in between, and then once again, the mizzen mast with no square sails, but the fore and aft sails at the back end of this boat.
So the captain has to keep a good eye on the weather, because if a storm's coming in or a squall, they're going to need to furl some of these sails up in a hurry.
And these crews can do it pretty quickly, but storms move pretty quickly too.
So it's a sense of urgency.
I bet there would be.
Okay, next up. Our next vessel is Gloria from Cartagena, Colombia. It's a little bit smaller vessel at 212 feet, and it sure looks magnificent sailing along here.
It absolutely does, and the reason why we're looking at this particular one is because it's unlikely in New York Harbor that our viewers will get a chance to see a vessel of that size with probably every sail in their inventory is up flying and full. And you can see by that big flag, which probably takes a pretty good breeze to get it to stretch out that far. It's a breezy day and they're moving pretty well.
Well, I think if you like sailing, this would be a good day to be out there.
That
on the
would
Gloria.
indeed.
So Gloria, perfect. And finally, we come along to the Juan Sebastián Elcano. This is another 371-foot vessel sailing away from here right now, looking kind of gallant, and the rig's a little bit different.
This is, as is often in the case of these types of vessels, captains and boat owners would change the rigs somewhat because of performance or their needs. In this case, what we see is a foresail that is square rigged. You see off to the left,
Yep.
It's on the top of what are foremast in this particular case. The other three masts are all fore and aft rigged. You notice they're all gaffed just like the spanker that we looked at. And that's the way it goes all the way forward. And there was simply a matter of a changing need and performance standards. So that's why when you look at these boats that are in the harbor, at the time when they're able to get up their sails up, many of them will look a little different. And the answer is they're all basically ships, but they're rigged differently.
Well, this one, it seems to me, should be able to sail a lot higher and closer to the wind.
That's exactly right.
So they reconfigured the boat because they wanted to go to windward better.
Because their route was going to be to windward more than other routes.
Well, Peter, that was really helpful, getting a good look at these boats and describing the different rigs and how they sail. So thank you very much for taking the time and joining us today. For Peter Sweetzer, I'm Gary Jobson, and we'll be back.